Sometimes we can take personality traits and make them the reason why certain things do happen, don't happen, the excuses why we do step into certain situations or don't step into certain situations, or even the justification for why we've behaved a certain way. So I have seen leaders who self-identify as introverts be exceptional at accountability conversations. I have seen extroverts, self-identified extroverts that are leaders that are terrible at accountability conversations, and not just terrible in their skill set in doing them, but they do not want to step into that space. These are identified personality traits that would often conflict with what we would think would be a skill needed for those things. And this is the problem we can run into when it comes to taking our personality traits and believing that they mean a very certain specific thing, meaning we've become rigid in this label or identifier. So flexibility is a skill in emotional intelligence. It's part of the stress management realm. And if we just think about how we feel when we are rigid compared to how we feel when we are flexible and relate that to levels of stress we experience, we may suddenly recognize when I am rigid in something, I do feel more stressed out. When I am flexible in something, I feel less stressed. So why is that? What's going on in the mind? In rigidity, the mind is fixed, so it is set. And this causes a certain amount of stress when we have disagreement rolling around it. That will spark narratives around disagreement, but it will also spark emotions that are negative. And so now we're in sort of a storm of negativity. Negativity spikes cortisol in our system. Cortisol is the stress hormone. We can see the cycle growing. When we lean on our flexibility, what we will find is that our mindset will be open and malleable. We'll be curious. We'll be a scientist. We'll be looking to explore for information and ways to compile that information that fits a particular outcome or goal we're trying to achieve. We will also notice in that space that cortisol does not spike. And so our stress hormones aren't elevating our emotional experience. So we're much more able to self-regulate negative emotions and live in a space of positivity, of optimism, another skill in stress management. What does this have to do with personality traits? If we are rigid in what our personality is and isn't, then we can be spiking our cortisol levels as leaders around certain tasks that would seem to conflict with a personality trait. Instead, understanding that our personality has standard deviation. So we're an introvert. We can dial that up and we can dial that down. So we're an extrovert. We can dial that up. We can dial that down. We do not need to live in the rigidity of a trait, especially if it's unhelpful to how we then lead and the responsibilities of a leader. My encouragement this week as we explore our emotional intelligence is being able to pay attention to when am I rigid in my beliefs about myself, who I am, and then what that means. And when can I be more flexible in growing some standard deviation around those labels or identifiers?